Robert McCammon.
Thank you. Okay. Are we in business here with the mic? Is this good? Can everybody hear me okay? I'm going to have to do that one to pin forward. There's no way to bring this out. But okay, we'll just go like that. Hello, this is great. Thank you for being here today. This is so nice. You know, we have, we're back to sort of the winter today, so I really appreciate you making sure where you came from to be here. Thanks so much. I guess, well, all right. You know, the day has arrived, and it seems like it's been a long time coming for me. The Cardinal Black is finally out. I'm so glad that it's out. And I guess you all are fans of the series? Yeah. I guess? Okay, all right. You know, when I started the series, I didn't know it was going to be a series. And if you've read Speaks the Nightbird, it really, you know, I was in a situation where I was doing horror work, and I thought, you know, I really want to do something different. And I've always loved history. I've loved this colonial era. So I thought, in a way that what I always wanted to do was like do history sort of as the Hammer horror films would have done it. You know, if you know the Hammer horror films, you know, and not the monsters. But you've got, you know, the fog-shrouded streets and, you know, the creepy alleyways and the strange characters. That's kind of what I was going for. So, you know, when I did the first book, Speaks of the Nightbird, you know, my publisher was like, you know, what is this? You know, absolutely, really, what is this? Because it was so different what I'd been doing. And that was on purpose. I didn't want it to be different what I was doing because I figured I covered all the bases in terms of horror work. You know, I've done the vampires, I've done the zombies, I've done the werewolf, you know. So I thought, you know, it's time to do something different. And of course, then the publisher, you know, resisted a little bit. So I took the book. The book was almost bought. Speaks of Nightbird was almost bought, and you may all know the story because I've repeated the story several times. The book was almost bought by Viking, and Viking Press is like the temple of publishing in New York. It's fabulous. So I'm assigned an editor for Speaks of Nightbird, who reads the book, and I go up to talk to her, and she says, well, first of all, Rick, you can't make me believe that people were as religious in this era as you're painting them out to be. And I said, you know, I'm toning down the religious element quite a lot. You know? So she says, you know, there's a scene in which the doctor and the magistrate, actually they smoke pot together, right? You know. So she says, they're supposed to be smoking weed? I said, yeah. She says, is it supposed to be funny? I said, well, I think it's kind of humorous. She says, it is not. It's that kind of thing. So I realized, you know, this is just not going to work. She didn't know anything about the era, and why she got to be my editor there at Viking, I have no earthly idea. But so we're talking about some of the language that I use in the book, and she says, what does this word mean? This word Leviathan. What does that word mean? Honestly. And you know, because I had mentioned there's of course a great religious pamphlet. Actually, it's a pamphlet known basically on religion, but on life itself, called Leviathan. I think it's by Thomas Hobbes. In that is the phrase "life is nasty, brutish, and short." We probably all know that phrase, but it's in that pamphlet. So she asked me what the word Leviathan meant. Now here is Viking Press in New York City, with one of the greatest libraries in the world, only a few blocks away, you know, and this woman does not know the name of the meaning of the word Leviathan. Therefore, in every book in the Matthew series, there is the word Leviathan. Yes. It's hidden there somewhere in the book. And the last book of this series is, the title is Leviathan. So, you know, I'm not meaning to make a point, but I started thinking, why not make a point if you can? I don't know. But, you know, I knew it's not going to work because we just didn't see eye to eye on anything. And she didn't understand the era, and she said, you know, the ending of this book is just bitter. Matthew should stay with Rachel and marry Rachel and stay in the town. And at that point, I was beginning to realize that I really liked the character. You know, I really thought there was a potential to make a series out of this character and carry him on. And so I thought, you know what, I can't do that. I must move him on. He has a destiny to fulfill. And anyway, that editor and I broke all correspondence because she wanted to do something I could not do. So I had to turn my back on Viking Press, which was, you know, and when you turn your back on a publisher like that, there are consequences. You're basically thrown out. You're basically thrown out of the business almost, which is why I really remained silent for, I guess it was, what was it, 10 years or so? 10 years, because I thought my career was over, you know, because the great gods, and I viewed them as gods. I really did. Oh my God, I realized this is all going on Facebook. Oh no, oh no. Oh gosh, okay, who cares? Come on. Drive it in. So, you know, I realized that I was done, you know. So it was quite a shock to me to think that I still got these ideas of books that I want to do, but yet you're not going to have the opportunity to do the books because you're basically through. So I was doing a reading at UAB. I was reading part of Speaks the Nightbird, and there was an editor there from River City Press in Montgomery. And so she said, basically, what are you doing with the book? And I said, well, nothing. And so they published the very first edition of Speaks the Nightbird. And it just went from there. And Speaks the Nightbird now, it's interesting because it's one of my most popular books. And I think that there is a popularity of this book, this series, that actually goes around the world. It's amazing to me. And why is that? I wondered why it is. Why is it that people really, this series appeals to people, and why, you know? And I think it's because, well, I hope it's because the writing is good, and because, you know, that's the number one thing. And I hope that it's an entertaining series. But I also think that, you know, there's a simplicity to that world that we don't have today. There's a simplicity. You know, there are no cell phones. There's no constant demand of going hither and yon. Travel is not fast. So there's a relaxed feel to that world that I think people, whether you know it or not, I think it appeals to people, and certainly it appeals to me. Because one of the things I found, because I've still been doing contemporary novels as I've been doing the Matthew series, and I've realized that with cell phones, it's very difficult now to write a suspense novel because you're never out of contact with people. And one of the tenets of the suspense genre is that you're in a way isolated. And so now when you're writing a horror novel or suspense novel, you really have to work to make sure. And it's kind of phony because the thing is they either lose their cell phone or or they're in a place where the cell phones don't work. Like, really? Okay. I've done that myself, so, really. So it makes it difficult. And so I think that's the appeal. That's part of the appeal to me of writing the series. I don't have to worry about that. I don't have to worry about the cell phones, the constant contact, and all that. So, so it's interesting though that also some writers have gone like way into tech. I mean, that's what they do. Tech is their thing. But to me, I enjoy the simplicity of this colonial era. Well, okay, let me talk about where the series is going. I don't know if you know much yet about Cardinal Black. But the series is, I have 2 more books to do in the series. The next book is called The King of Shadows. And of course, the final book is called Leviathan. But in between, I've come up with, I realized I've done several short stories in the Matthew world. And I think I'm going to do a few more short stories, and we're going to do a book of short stories, maybe short novelettes in that world. It's called 7 Shades of Evil. And I think that will be out probably between King of Shadows and Leviathan. And I've realized the fun thing for me is that it suddenly dawned on me that I've created a world in which I can write stories about anybody in this world, and anybody in Matthew Corbett's world, and it can be interesting. Because this last, I don't know if you know, but there's a short story on the net, on my website, called The Pale Pipe Smoker, that I just finished not long ago. And that has Catherine Harold and Minx Cutter in it. You know, I can use Catherine, I can use Hudson Greathouse, I can use new characters, and I have a new character they introduced in Cardinal Black, who I think will probably go on. So that's fun for me to do. But I've thought about, you know, I'm slowing down a little bit, I realize, because I'm working now on King of Shadows, but I'm not really like, I'm not, you know, floor to the flooring yet. Because I've realized I've really enjoyed doing this series. I mean, it's been very exciting to me to come up with these ideas and the narrow escapes that Matthew has and the impossible situations. And I'm really going to miss that. Because it's almost been like a family in a way. You know, I know these people so well. And after you write a series like this, what the Potter series, did that go 7 or 5 or 7? Did that go 7 books? 7 books, okay. You know, now you can understand why, when you write these series books and you really get into the world and the people, they become like your family. And you can almost hear them saying to you, you know, please, carry me on, carry me forward. You know, if I'm taking a break, it's like, hey, what am I doing? Where am I? I'm in your mind, yes, but where am I? Where am I in terms of how other people see me? In other words, you know, get off your butt and start writing. but it's been an exciting experience for me, and I think, and I hopefully a good experience for you. I look at other series that have been written. I'm not sure there's anything really like this out there anywhere. So I'm pretty proud of that. Now I know there's not anything like this out there anywhere. Well, this was fun to do. I decided to do something that was fun, and it represents that the series is fun. It's tongue-in-cheek. It's not, you know, of course there's some serious subjects going on, but it's not like ironclad serious. It's something to have fun with too. We have a video that's just gone up on the website now of actually doing this makeup that I did. And the makeup was done by a woman named Amanda Chapman, who lives in Tuscumbia. And she is fabulous with makeup. She has, on her website, you'll see her makeups are just great. A couple of years ago, she had a project called the 30 Days of Halloween, and she did a different makeup every day for herself, which were fantastic makeups. So anyway, we have a video that's just gone up. I think it went up this morning about the process of doing this makeup, and also her work too. Okay, well, would anybody like to hear a reading of some kind? I was going to read a little bit of the, maybe not the whole first chapter, but the first chapter, some of the first chapter of Cardinal Black. Is that okay with you?
Sure.
You got it? And also I want to stress that when I read this first chapter, one of the things I always wanted to do in the book is, in the series, is get the reader quickly into the atmosphere of what's going on. And that's the thing that I really wanted to do. It gets you in there quick. So, all right, let me start out. I think that's dead. Oh, okay. Okay, we don't worry about that. I'll Google that now. Hear me well, said Gardner Littlehorn, resplendent in his overcoat of peacock blue, with rolled cuffs of pigeon blood crimson. Atop his head was a self-same blue-colored tricorn, whose red band clasped a single white dove's feather. He was, as the popular saying of the day went, bird in hell. His thin, ebony mustache twitched upon an equally thin upper lip, while at the downward point of his chin, the perfectly trimmed goatee was yet another point downward. Well, he repeated, his small black eyes aflame in the low light of a December's late afternoon. I am the honorable assistant to the High Constable. As such, I have the power to slam the law down upon you like a 2-ton cannon upon a penny's weight mouse if you fail to comply with what I have demanded. I have neither the time nor the patience to dally with you an instant longer. Therefore, I shall ask you only once again before I am compelled to move to action. Will you or will you not? But, sir, said the 10-year-old boy, whose gray clothing was indeed mouse-colored, and yet ample enough to withstand, if not the weight of a heavy cannonball, the tremble of light snowflakes that were beginning to swirl down on the streets, alleyways, crossroads, courtyards, gardens, and garrets of cold but bustling London town. It's just 5 pence, the young salesman went on, as snow dappled his black woolen cap. Surely, sir, you can afford. My ability to afford is not the issue. Not the issue, spewed the rough voice and flecks of spittle from the mouth of Lillehorn's florid-faced henchman and companion in chicanery by the name of Dippin' Knack, who stood just behind his master, as any good dog should. Knack, I shall speak for myself, thank you, said the master to the hound in a tone of sharp rebuke, and the two-legged canine pulled his neck in a little tighter to his fur line. Fear not. Though short and squat by nature, Knack wore beneath his garish purple tricorn hat an ornately curled and powdered white wig that nearly towered over Lillehorn's shoulders. Lillehorn returned his attention to the boy, who he determined was not going to get away with ignoring this demand, which seemed now more important than ever, simply for the principle of it. Lillehorn lifted his ebony cane with his hand grip of a silver lion's head and placed the tip against the boy's right shoulder, beneath which was the leather pouch that held the solitary object of his desire. Give me that last copy of Lord Puffrey's pen, Lillehorn said. I command it. Command it, barked Dippin' Knack, who didn't realize he had purchased a coat advertised as being trimmed with beaver, when in fact it was brown-dyed street cur. The cherub cheeks of his bully boy's face seemed to pulse with excited blood, stirred by the prospect of a street fight with a diminutive paper boy. Knack's outburst, however rough it sounded, brought forth only a slow blink from the lad and a resigned sigh from the assistant to London's High Constable. I have determined, said Lillehorn in a calmer tone to the subject of his obsession, that I have paid for my last copy of the pen. That is to say, as befits my position of authority and responsibility, I expect some items in this city to be given to me freely and with good cheer. Your news sheet shall be one of them. And why exactly should that be, sir? Dared ask the boy with a defiant forward jutting of his chin. Simply because, came his silken-spoken reply, without the protection of the law to Lord Puffrey's business, and indeed to all the businesses in this fair city, he should see his pens snatched away by ruffians at the very door of his print shop, if the print shop itself is not burned to ashes on the ground. I, and the sturdy wall of order that stands between Lord Puffrey's door and every door you might look on all along the street, and the evil tentacles of chaos. I assume you know the meaning of that. At last I found a pen. 5 pence here. A round-bellied gent in a brown overcoat and a same-hued tricorn atop his own pile of wig curlings had suddenly pushed his way onto the scene, namely the corner of Farringdon and Stonecutter Streets, a few blocks west of the Old Bailey, from which Lillehorn and Knack had emerged strutting and full of not the flames of justice, but the steady embers of avarice. The new arrival had silver pennies in one hand, offering them up, and was already reaching for the news sheet with the other. Hold, hold, Lillehorn nearly shouted, as if finding a pen this day was like trying to pluck out a hay straw from a stack of needles. Hold, he says, and to back up this statement came Knack's wicked ebony billy club, his favorite fiend. Knack plunged forward past Lillehorn like the devil's pitchfork and put the pain-giving end of the club beneath the intruder's descending terraces of chins. You'll not have it, Knack snarled. It's already been took. The gent staggered back on his polished boot heels. This is an outrage, he sputtered, looking back and forth from one man to another and finding them both as ugly as toenail soup. You have no claim on the paper. Where's your money, sir? Here's our roll of dough. Knack gave the man's chin a thrust to the billy club. It's good and solid, you toad-faced warhog. An outrage and an injury as well. I'm going for the law. There's a constable hereabouts, I'm sure. To be sure there is, said Knack, with a crooked grin that displayed his unfortunate mouthful of jagged teeth. You're looking at one. And right here's the constable to the assistant of the high constable himself. So bite on that apple and piss a prune. You men are mad, came in a steady response. Crude louts, constables. What's this world coming to? I don't know about the world, but you're coming near to a ride in the gutter. Off with you. Outrage, outrage, cried the man. And though he puffed steam amid the drifting snowflakes, he gave up the battle as lost and retreated into the moving mass of London humanity at his back. No, you don't. Lillehorn reached out with his free hand to clutch the paper boy's shoulders as the lad had made a move to dart away, but it had first been a twist of the head rather than a leap of the legs. Take the sheet, Knack, Lillehorn said. And so it was done. My manager will skin me alive for this. He counted all the copies out, the boy said. Some advice to you. Lillehorn released the shoulder and placed the cane's tip alongside the boy's cheek. Tell your manager he miscounted by one. Look him directly in the eyes when you say this, and believe it yourself. Believe it so fervently that it becomes true. You'll have no trouble if you believe it with enough ferocity. The boy paused, then with a quizzical expression and a nodding of the eyebrows, thank you. You're welcome. Now run along. Lillehorn gave the cheek a quick pat with the cane. The paper boy scurried away with his lesson on how to be an adept liar. Lillehorn snatched the pen from Knack before Knack had a chance to read a word of it. And Lillehorn said with the air of the victor's satisfaction, let us retire to Mr. Cholmondeley's coffee house. He already understands the importance of a cup of free coffee to a hard-working public servant. Two hard-working public servants, said Knack, nearly adding a chortle. Lillehorn replied with a frozen countenance. Off they went, one following the other, as had been their custom in New York for several years and now in London, the same. As the pair progressed westward along Stonecutter toward Cholmondeley's establishment on Norwood Street, Lillehorn mused that on this day of the 12th month of 1703, the entire 600,000 population of the city must be out on the streets, chattering and nattering, steaming the air with their breath and the noxious odors of their nags, pulling coach, carriage, and wagons. Most of them, it seemed to him, clutched copies of Lord Puckery's pen in their glove mitts. Oh, what a farce they played, these fancy prigs of London, he thought, prancing to and fro to display their winter finery, their new hats, expensive powdered wigs, jostling and elbowing, crowding past each other for a look into the windows at some fresh gewgaw or sugared dumpling. And they smiled and smiled their false smiles with eyes as hard as iron and teeth ready to bite the heads off their neighbors' children if it took that to prosper in this city. He knew them, knew what they were thinking of him when they gave him those sideways glances that one might give a clump of horse figs in the street so as to avoid leaving a boot print in it. Yes, he knew them, and he hated them for their thoughts and their looks. Lately, he realized he was a foreigner here. He was no longer a true citizen of England, for he had the roughness of New York about him. He carried it wrapped around himself like a cloak of brine-soaked ropes. And no matter how he dressed or tried to cover it over, his essence, this phantasm, was there to betray him. That last dinner party he had been talking about attending turned into a nightmare of his ill-taken witticisms and botched choices of what fork to use for which dish of clotted grease. He feared he had lost his sophistication during his years across the Atlantic. And now it seemed to pass his sophistication here with some caustic remarks aimed at belittling the colonists, delivered as if one were speaking through a clench of lockjaw. If it were up to him, he would book passage on the next ship leaving for the colonies. But he had this prominent position. His wife, the princess, had clutched upon this place like a mollusk on a sea-slimed rock. For a present, at least to him, mother and father had paid for their very fine living quarters, had bought their home furnishings and purchased their two matched chestnut horses and a carriage. Therefore, meet Gardner Lillehorn, assistant to the High Constable of London. Oh, so happy denizen of this great metropolis, and ex-resident of the rustic town of New York, likely never to return there. But the truth was, he felt he'd really been someone of importance there with a job to do, and had earned the respect of all. Well, almost all. Here the title was grand, but he was naught but a boot scrape to the men above him. And above him were so many. Damn, what a mob, he said to no one in particular, as he and Knack advanced against a stiffening and more frigid wind. The snowflakes were beginning to fly into their faces. In the sky, the low-gray clouds were interlaced with the black streamers of coal smoke rising from the industrial chimneys that stood tall over even the best parts of the city, as if reminding the population that one tumble and spate of bad luck could turn the finest of fashionables into a grime-streaked furnace, stoker chained to the never-ending job of feeding power into London's massive mall. Within a few minutes, the blue-lettered sign of Cholmondeley's Coffee Parlor came into view, and with great relief to remove himself from the swift currents of humanity, Lillehorn entered the place with Knack at his heels. A coal-burning stove and a brick fireplace provided heat, and hanging lanterns cut the gloom. Though there were already too many patrons in the parlor for Lillehorn's complete satisfaction, he guided himself and his compatriot to a vacant table at the rear, and, after doffing his overcoat, he settled his rump into a high-backed chair beneath a dusty oil portrait of a stern bewigged gent who seemed to be scowling at the new generation of Londoners from his current position in eternity. Coffee, of course, Lillehorn told the young girl who came to take their order. He was already spreading the pen upon the table before him. 2, he said, before Knack could open his fanged mouth and frighten the dame. Black and medium sweet, he went on, with no mind nor cares for what Knack desired. Oh, and by the by, he said with silk in his voice, but this was not the same girl who had served him 3 days before in his last visit. Remind Mr. Cholmondeley that this order is for Gardner Lillehorn, Esquire. He will know the name and the position and all that shall be square with the bill. Then, with the maid's departure, he turned his attention to the news of the day, read beneath a flickering lantern and a dead man's disapproval. Lord God, Lillehorn said at his first sighting of the large print declaration across the top of the sheet. Read it, read it. Knack was pressing forward over the table. Lillehorn did. Albion and the monster of Plymouth still at large. Beneath that was a declaration in smaller print, but no less emphatic. Constables fear renewed murder spree. And tucked under that, a third. Beware Albion's wicked blade and the evil hand of Matthew Corbett. Then Lillehorn repeated his first reaction, but with a quieter breath. Lord God. I knew that damn Corbett was a rotten apple, said Knack, the smack of his palm against the tabletop. Couldn't sit still in New York. He had to follow our tails over here. I should have brained him when I had the chance. He frowned. What's a spree? Sort of like a squirt? In this instance, more like a puddle of piss. Lillehorn shook his head. Sounds like nonsense. As far as I know, we fear no renewed murder spree or squirt or whatever. At least not from Albion or Corbett. I have to say, Knack, this puts a sodden rag on my belief in the pen. Of course, many of these articles are fantastical. I know about the ape rampaging through Parliament for one, but I thought there was a fig of truth in most of it. What? Knack sounded shaken to the soul. You mean Lady Everlust didn't birth no two-headed child? Entertaining but doubtful. The thing about Albion and Corbett, well, it's true they're connected in some way, but Lillehorn let it trail off. The golden masked killer and Phantom of the Night had indeed taken Corbett from a guarded coach buried in New York Ass-Payne to Houndditch prison nearly 3 weeks ago, and from there both Albion and Corbett had seemingly vanished from the face of the earth. Then Hudson Greathouse and that irritating Grigsby girl had come to the Old Bailey wanting to know where Corbett was, and what could be said? Nothing but the truth, and it'd be damned. Somewhere, if he was still alive, Matthew Corbett was in the clutches of a masked maniac who had already dispatched 6 victims by the sword. For that matter, what had happened to Greathouse and the girl, who evidently had accompanied that big oaf to London because she was in love with Corbett? Lillehorn had expected them to show back up the Old Bailey to press their presence and oppress himself, but no, they had not. It was obvious to Lillehorn that Lord Puffrey had decided the association of Albion and Corbett still warranted publication to a bloodthirsty audience. How Lord Puffrey had gotten that story to begin with was no doubt easily explained by one of the coach's guards giving over the tale for a few coins. He might have done the same had he been confronted by Albion that night. But larger questions remained. What need did Albion have of Corbett, and where were they? The cup of hot coffee came. Mr. Cholmondeley says the bill is square, the serving bill offered. He says he wants no trouble with the law. There shall be none, Lillehorn replied, but he couldn't help giving the girls ample bottom a push with his cane, which he turned to walk away. At that instance of misdirected attention, Knack grabbed up the pen and squinted hard over its bounty of print in the yellow lamplight. This has been a strange time, said Lillehorn, who decided to sip his coffee and rest his eyes from any further inflammations of the names Albion and Corbett. Judge Archer is still missing, you know, all that in the Gazette about him being kidnapped from the Cable Street Hospital in Whitechapel and him suffering from a gunshot wound. Well, what was he doing in Whitechapel and who has him? Somebody with a grudge against him, to be sure. And then the clerk, Stephen Jessley, doesn't come into work one morning and it seems the address he has given on his employment papers is false. No one can find him either. It makes no sense. Knack, are you listening to me? Obviously he was not. Says here a wall was busted down off Union Street and they found an old sea trunk with 10 shrunken heads in it. Can you fathom such a thing? It is beneath me, said Lillehorn. I can no longer trust Lord Puffrey. Can you trust this? Knack began to haltingly read. Word comes to us that the missing Italian opera star, Madame Alicia Condolari, has been spirited away by her lover, the pirate Red Jack Adams, taken to a secret hideout, Paradise Cove. More to come. Knack looked up and grinned, a frightening sight. Ain't part of your job supposed to be finding her? His grin fractured. His brain came up with a thought. Hey, might be she went off with that pirate and don't want to be found. I'm not sure she wanted her escort and coach driver to be murdered as they were. Lillehorn reminded the other. He took another sip of the strong black coffee. There were over 2,000 coffee shops in the city. Part of his mind is wondering where else he might get free cups. The situation of Madame Condolari concerns me, but until someone comes up with real news, I and the street constables are equally at a loss to speculate. That brings me to some business, said Knack. I need tomorrow night off. Tomorrow night? What's the reason? I would bring it to your attention that you have worked only 3 nights this week, and that you have a very short route in reasonable hours, in a safe district, and that I have pulled quite a few strings to get you a fair trial as a fledgling constable. Fledgling or not, I'm in for a dice game with the Jackal, and I mean to be there. So I need you to get me off tomorrow night. Knack cocked his head to one side, his ears awaiting an affirmative reply. Lillehorn shifted uneasily in his chair. He mused that if this damn fool before him didn't know about the 100 pounds Lillehorn had skimmed from the New York Treasury, and also about that certain lady at the town to whom most of the money had gone, then he would dismiss his request as much as he would have dismissed the demand for Knack to come with him to London. But there was the wife and her parents to consider, and God help the poor soul who crossed that bunch. Knack would certainly go running to them at the first opportunity to cause mischief if he were not coddled in check. Very well, came the reluctant answer. I suspect, however, that your association with those cretins at the Jackal might do your undoing. I can handle them myself. Even sitting down, Knack managed to swell his chest with indignant pride. Anyways, they all knows I'm a constable, and I've got the power of the law at my backside. Ain't nobody giving me no trouble over there. Knack took a drink of his coffee and continued scanning the pen. Ah! He exclaimed so loudly the 2 patrons at the next table nearly jumped out from under their wigs. Here's something for you. Let me read it. An open letter to London law. What there is of it. He looked up and grinned again while Lillehorn's face was a study in stone. Go ahead, Lillehorn prompted. Lillehorn read haltingly again. It has come to our attention that our so-called officers of the law in our great city have turned a blind eye to several local crimes of which most would be shocked The latest being the mass murder of, give that to me. Little Horn nearly ripped the sheet out from under Knack's paws. He positioned it in favorable lamplight and read aloud. The mass murder in Whitechapel 2 weeks ago of the young men and women belonging to a group known as the Black-Eyed Broodies, a massacre upon which this publication is reported more thoroughly in our previous issues. While we certainly do not condone the activity of such groups, it is a crime upon itself that this particularly gruesome and demoniacally inspired mass murder seems to be overlooked by our so-called officers of the law. Indeed, the murders among these groups are becoming common, no thanks to our fine officials who appear to be as equally frightened of these organizations as they are of the denizens of the shadows who use them for their evil purposes. Little Horn grimaced but kept reading. And yes, we dare to name names, among them Professor Fell, Colonel Fives, and Maccabeus Decay, who can say what inhuman pestilence against society is being created even now, encouraged by the inattention, one might say, the ineptitude of our so-called officers of the law. Knack chose that moment to make a rumbling in his throat that Little Horn took as mocking humor. And when Little Horn darted his own black eyes of brooding at Knack, the other man quickly pretended to be examining some small clean spot on his fingernails. Mind yourself, Little Horn ordered, and then he returned to the last paragraph of this distasteful open letter. Therefore, this publication no longer aspires to encourage these absent lawmen to action, but instead aspires to encourage the average hardworking and lawful citizens of this great city to action, by storming the Old Bailey by force if need be, to jolt these mindless sops from their paid sleep. We suggest that citizens band together to demand that justice be done, or else that our Parliament clean out every existing so-called officer of the law from their nooks, crannies, caves, and hammocks, and send them to the mattresses they may occupy in the quiet confines of their homes, where they will no longer be bothered by the demands of an occupation and no longer be rewarded with public funds for a job undone. Signed, yours sincerely, Lord Puffery. How about that? Said a heavy-set gent at the next table, who had been leaning in Little Horn's direction to over here, and whose own copy of the pen was spread out before him. Strong words, huh? It's about time, I'd say. What's your opinion? Little Horn's face quivered as if he'd been slapped. His teeth were clenched. He felt Knack watching him like a dirty cat watching a writhing rat. Little Horn unclenched his teeth. My opinion is, it's about time. The man nodded, thumped a fist upon his pen as if to drive the point even further home, and returned to his coffee and the conversation he'd been having with his table mate. Don't speak, Little Horn said to Knack, before the other could get that mouth working. Knack consented to draw his coffee, making a noise like the dragging of a chain across a wet stone floor. Well, Little Horn went on with a carefully lowered voice, now I know why Master Constable Patterson was in such a black mood this afternoon. He must have gotten hold of a pen earlier on and been pricked by it. But the constables can't be everywhere. Anyway, they're hated in Whitechapel. The last one assigned there was found beaten to death and stuffed in a rain barrel, so what do the people expect? There can be no law when the people of a district don't wish it and actually fight against it. All right, yes, that gang massacre was a gruesome thing. Their eyeballs gouged out, put in a bottle, the devil's claws carved into their foreheads. Yes, one might say it was demoniacally inspired, but we as men of the law don't fear grappling with these criminals. It is a matter of rooting them out of their holes. No, we don't fear them, not a bit. It is unfair of Lord Puffery to make that false assertion. His next swallow of coffee drained the cup. False! He hissed at Knack across the table. Do you hear? Utterly false. I hear, Knack replied in a small voice, but I sure as hell ain't going to go around rooting nobody out of no holes. And he added, for emphasis, me being just a fleshman. The hell with this! Little Horn started to crumple the sheet between his hands, but saw something else that snagged his eyes. Here's the only item worth a damn in this paper. The weather prognosticator predicts we're in for a season of storms. Ha! Would you expect summery sunshine here on the eve of winter? Who couldn't make such a prediction? Lord Puffery must have taken that task upon himself, as well as the job of stirring up Parliament against the High Constable and against myself, who was to bear the weight of it. Though I can also be a prognosticator and see what the weather will be like tomorrow at that office. I'm needing tomorrow night off, said Knack, as if nothing else says he person mentioned it. You done vowed. You won't go back on your word, will you? Little Horn didn't answer. Just sat glowering. Knack picked up his billy club from the table, stood up and said, I'm heading to home. I'll walk my route tonight, good and proper. I'll count on it, came the terse reply. By your leave then, said Knack, returned the cur's fur collar of his coat up around his neck, gave his master a quick and ungainly bow, and headed for the door. On the street, flurries of snow blew through the evening's gathering dark. As the dark had fallen, so had the temperature. The blue December eve was speckled with the lamps of passing coaches and carriages, and in the windows of shops that remained open late to catch the passing crowd, which had much dwindled since Knack had followed Little Horn into Chalmers' parlor. Knack thrust his free left hand into a pocket, clenching his ever-present billy club in his right, and began to trudge against the chill wind toward his cellar hovel a mile north on Errol Street. He kept his head down in his thoughts on how he was going to get through such a cold night on duty. Even though his route took him only half a mile, all he had to do was walk a circle and swing his constable's lantern in an area that was mostly parkland, so what of it? It was fortunate for him that his 6 hours of work took him past 2 taverns that stayed open until the wee hours. And tonight, he meant to make use of their fireplaces and mugs of warm ale. Soon his mind drifted to the dice game tomorrow night at the Jackal, his favorite tavern, in a place where everyone knew him, and all were impressed by being in the presence of a constable. And so he failed to note the coal wagon that had been steadily following him since he'd walked out Cholmondeley's door. When he turned down the lonely length of Falstaff Alley to take his usual shortcut, he also failed to note the man who came up behind him and with one blow of a leather-wrapped piece of lead to the skull knocked Dippin' Knack sprawling upon the rough stones. Knack's purple tricorn went spinning away, and his ornate wig slid down upon one shoulder. He made a gurgling sound and tried to pull himself to his knees, but the assailant struck again, and most decisively Knack lay still. Ah, shit, said a second man, who had gotten down off the wagon and was holding the reins of his 2 horses at the mouth of Falstaff Alley. Did you kill him? The first man knelt down to check for a heartbeat. He ain't dead, was the verdict. He better not be. We're supposed to deliver 2. God take us if we don't. This one don't look like a constable. Are you sure about him? I'm sure. Like I said already, his name's Knack. He's been bragging his ass off at the Jackal. All right, then. Let's get him in. We wasted too much damn time waiting for him to come out of that coffee house. Somebody might come along here any minute. Somebody might, said the wagon's driver. What are they going to do about it? Call a constable? They both laughed at that. Lucky I seen him coming down the steps of the Bailey, said the driver as the 2 men hauled Knack's body up and carried him between them to the black pile of coal. Figured I might see a constable I recognized. Anyway, made our job one easier. They threw Knack onto the pile, and the man who'd done the striking climbed up and used a shovel to quickly cover the body with coal, being careful to finish to leave a space of air around the nostrils. When it was done, he took his seat beside the driver and drew his coat collar up around his throat. He wore a gray woolen cap and had half of a nose. Getting colder, he said, lifting his gaunt face toward the dark. Snow was coming down good and proper. The pen says storms ahead, said the driver. Mark it then, the other answered. All right. 1 down, 1 to go. The driver flicked the reins. The horses snorted steam and started off. The coal wagon's tired wheels creaked as they turned. And beside the white wig and the purple tricorn, a black billy club lay untended on the snow-dusted stones of Falstaff Alley. Chapter 1.
So did Little Horn ever get his free meal?
Always. Always. What a man. What a man. So you can see there how I really enjoy getting into the mood quickly. You know, you're into it very quickly, into the era quickly. With description, with the weather description, the city description, and that I think I hope is one key to your enjoyment of the series. That it does get you. It's like a time machine in a way. It puts you in that era. So hopefully that's part of why you enjoy the series. And even the villains are almost they're fun. The villains are fun, like Professor Fell and all the Cardinal Black. Oh, and I'd like to talk a little bit about this next book that I'm doing, King of Shadows. Something happened, they're on their way to Italy now to find this mirror for Professor Fell. And on the way, Matthew finds out why Professor Fell wants the mirror. Something happens before they get to Italy. And I wanted this next book to be sort of it's not a summary, it's not a summarization. But I want it to be something that kind of puts together everything that has been, and some of the characters that have been, and some of the characters come back, some of the dead characters come back. So it took me a little while to come up with the idea. I think it's very, very different. I want it to be very different too. But it's set on an island in the Mediterranean. So it's sort of summing up and getting ready for the last book of the series, which of course is Leviathan, and I want it to be really good. So I wanted to summarize and get you ready for the last book. Though the King of Shadows will stand on its own. So I'm very excited about that. I've started on it, should finish it in September. So there you go. Well, I was going to ask you, did you? Oh, we're going to do something? What are we going to do?
Do the drawing.
The drawing? We're going to do the drawing?
That Facebook Live.
Oh, Facebook Live.
We're good.
You want Facebook Live?
Yeah, we're good.
Well, I'll let you do what
Well,
you need to
you,
do.
I'm just going to give it to you.
Okay.
Do what you
We're
want.
going to do something.
Jake, we can't see you.
Okay, we're going to do that now.
It's not.
Well, hopefully there will be somebody here. That would be great.
And it's what it's for. This is
Okay. Yeah. All right. I'm going to show Horse Yes. How did I ever like that? Do that? That's good. All right, then pick one.
Here we go.
Here we go.
I wasn't allowed to go.
All right. Check it out. Okay. That one. Okay. Gardner Littlemore? He creeps into this. He creeps in everything. Pat Kramer.
Oh my God.
Pat Kramer. Pat Kramer's not here?
He's in
That's
Texas.
Mike.
He's in Texas. Okay, from Texas. All right. Okay. Pat Kramer, there you go.
Yay.
All right. Very good. Master of Ceremonies, what are we doing next?
Take the question, then
Yes.
go sign some books. Take one question, then go sign some books.
Well, we're going to ask, I'll take as many questions as you have to throw at me. So is that okay? Any questions about the series or anything else I've done, my other work or anything? Just open it up. Please ask. Yeah.
You mentioned Hammer horror as an influence
Yes.
on the series. What are some of your favorite Hammer horror?
Well, Roger Dracula's one. All the Frankenstein series that did, Peter Cushing and Christopher Lee, all those are great. And I watched those growing up as kids, so of course they had. But there's one that, what's the name of that one? The one where there's the skeletons on the horses, riding the horses. That's kind of set in Colonial, I think. It's like a, the skeleton gang. It's really not supernatural, but that's a gang that is dressed as skeletons on horses, and they even have the horses dressed as skeletons. That was really cool. And it's not supernatural, but that's one that really stuck with me. It's set in the Colonial era too, so I think that was good. But I just enjoy doing this, and I'm really going to miss this series. It's interesting to me also that I never could have done this series without the internet. And I talk about how, this is a time machine, put you back in another era, and you're not really, But I could never have written this book without the internet. Because it used to be when I was just working on regular contemporary work, before the internet, I'd make a list of questions that I needed to have answered. Then I would go to the library and answer those questions. But with the series, there's a question almost every page, about something. And I mentioned that there were like 2,000 or so coffee shops in the city of London. That's exactly true. There were, if not more. And you got to know that. I mean, you got to know, how many coffee shops were there, in the city of London at that time? You got to know that. And you're not. How do you find it? Well, you can find it off the internet. So thank God for doing that. So it's really helped me with my creativity and my writing. Anyone else? Yeah.
So what after the series? Another series?
I have 2 books in mind to do, and one in particular, one has kind of come new and fresh, but one called The Magic Collection of a Gentleman, I've had in mind to do for many years, but then another one jumped up, and so I'm going to do at least 2 more. And like I say, there's going to be another 2 more Matthew books, but one book of short stories and maybe novelettes, 7 in all, in between the last 2. So I still got some stuff to do. Yeah. Yeah.
2 quick ones. When you decided that the Matthew Corbett series was going to be a series,
Yeah.
and you decided you wanted him to live on and
Yes.
serialize it,
Right.
did you know then that how many books it would be? Did you have the plan mapped out?
Well, I figured it was going to be 10, a good round number. It was going to be and I was going to do the 7 Shades of Evil in between. But I realized I got to a point where I was doing other books too, and there was too much of a lag between the next Matthew, the previous Matthew book, and the next one. So I couldn't do that then. But I'm not going to do any contemporary work now until I finish the series. I always thought it was going to be 10 books. Well, I don't know why. I mean, I just always thought that was going to be. But I'll tell you an interesting thing that if you go back, and I just realized this not long ago, if you go back and read the part about when Matthew goes into the Queen of Bedlam's apartment there at the hospital, and it talks about some of the things that are on the walls, the pictures on the walls, the things in the apartment. Those things are foreshadowings of the last book in the series, and I didn't realize that. They're on their way to Venice, Italy right now. There's a portrait, there's a picture painting of Venice, Italy on her wall. There are masks on her wall. There are all sorts of things, trinkets and things in that room that almost foreshadow, and I have no earthly idea that I did that on purpose. I have none, because I didn't know where the series was going. I thought it was going to go to Russia. I thought we were going to end up in Russia. So, obviously not going to, but I had no idea. So when you look back in your apartment, it's a strange thing. What's going on there? I don't know. I mean, I think the whole thing about writing is kind of mystic. You're operating on faith. You're operating with your own, within the limits of your own ability, but you're operating on faith that something's going to work out. It's going to work out. So again, 9, 10 books, I kind of figured it's going to work out, and it will.
And then the follow-up, speaking about Russia, are we going to get lucky enough to have another Michael Gallatin book?
I have a title for it. I have the title is Peter's the Wolf. I'm not sure it will be about his son. He and his son team up to do something. Because I introduced his son in that. So, maybe.
Here's hoping.
Maybe. Well, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate it. Thank you a lot. Yeah.
Will there ever be a matching edition of hardcover edition of Speaks the Nightbird? That matches the rest.
Being filmed. I don't care. Sumner Schuster's made it very difficult to do anything with that book.
Cemetery Dance?
I thought when I did the book and offered to them, I thought they would like a series. And why they didn't, I don't know. But they made it very difficult to do anything with that book because that's the first in the series. And so they kind of keep me from doing a box set, and they keep me from, but I don't know. That's just the way it is. So maybe, I don't know, but the world would have to kind of shift on its axis for something natural like that. I don't know. I hope it would be great. Anyone else? Yeah.
Kind of a similar question. One of my favorite books by you is Mystery Walk.
Uh-huh.
But why is that one not got like the limited edition treatment like the other ones have?
Hang tight.
Yeah, we've had an offer for that. So we're thinking about it, but we have that offer. You like that?
Yeah, I love it.
You like that? Okay, good. Glad. Someone else? Yeah.
Did you choose your Audible narrator for the series?
Did you ever send him a Facebook question, Lynn?
Because I'm obsessed with him.
Okay. All right. Isn't he good? Isn't he good?
Yeah.
If you haven't heard this Audible edition, he's a Broadway actor. He's able to do voices, but not in such a way that they're over the top, right? He does the women's voices. He does everything that's perfect. I didn't choose him, but I'm so glad he's doing it because people call me and ask me how to pronounce things. You know, they'll email me and ask me how to pronounce things, and he obviously really enjoys doing it. He's gotten a lot of good comments about his work. But of course, you know he's very, very good with this. But I didn't have any. But I'm so glad he's doing it. I mean, I don't think I could have chosen a better person to do that. He's great, isn't he? My reading today, you know, somebody asked me once if I'd ever wanted to read my own work. At Wargo does the reading. I mean, it's a fabulous job because it is a lot of work. I was asked to do a reading of the first chapter of Boy's Life for England a few years ago. So I went down to a recording studio in Homewood. Read 14 pages. Took all day long to do 14 pages. Because, you know, when you mess up, it's like, oh, we got to do that again. And when you're doing the microphone, you got all the equipment around you, it's very tense and nervous. I can't imagine reading a book of 400-something pages and keeping your voice fresh and your voice not giving out, or you're, you know, not thinking, oh my God, I got to go back to it again today. But he doesn't feel that way. He's very excited about the series, and so thank God for Greg Ward. He's great, really good, really good. Anyone else?
You think there'll ever be a series on Netflix or Prime on that, or something like that?
Well, we have been, this is still filming, isn't it? Why is this still filming? We have been negotiating for 6 months. And nothing has been signed yet. As they call it, paper. It has to be paper yet. But we have come to some agreement, and so that hopefully will happen. I hope they're watching. Because if they watch, I see your applause.
I'll give you the link later.
So, did you travel, or pretty much using internet?
Pretty much use the internet. Dana Geldon does the Outlander series? Yeah. The Outlander. She does a lot of hers by traveling, and I don't. You know, I do most of mine. But something she pointed out to someone, and I think it's exactly right. She said, a place has a particular aroma, and you can't get that aroma, you know, by not traveling. I wish I could travel to these places, but you know, of course, a lot of these places are dead and gone now. But the aroma would remain. The aroma would remain. Of course, I imagine what it would be. I can imagine what it would be. But anyway, that was an interesting point she made, that to get the proper aroma of a place, you must actually visit that place. And she's talking about some of these castles in Scotland that she visits. Yeah. Anyone else? Anyone else? All right. Yeah.
Did you have a certain town or city in mind when you wrote Zephyr in Boy's Life?
I had visited a small town, actually in North Alabama, with a friend of mine growing up, and that's where his grandmother lived. He would take me there. It was in Walker County, and it was a small town like that, and it was a dream place to me. So it's like that wonderful town that probably never existed to anyone, but should have existed.
Right.
Exists only in your imagination, and that's kind of what I wanted to be. You know, yeah.
My good friend RJ Rolls is watching right now on Facebook, and he's like super fan. Could you say hey to him?
Right. Hey, hello.
He lives up in West Virginia, and he's got like, you know, every single book, you know, that kind of deal. He was super jealous.
Right.
So appreciate that.
Thank you. Thanks. Yes. Okay. Well, anyone else? Then I guess we'll go to our grant. We want to do that. Okay. Well, thank you all for being here. Okay. Yeah. Thank you, sir.
No.
Thanks. Thank you. We'll take questions. All right.